Breaking news this Monday night, sudden resignation. Why Newfoundland and Labrador's premier has abruptly called it quits. What did the Prime Minister accomplish in his emergency meeting about those rail blockades? Plus, fresh fears about how they could drive up food prices. Growing frustration on a cruise ship.
I just hope to see an end to this.
And why others who got the all clear are told to get back under quarantine. And a money idea. How Terry Fox is in the running.
He's a hero.
To be the face of Canada's $5 bill.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with breaking news from Newfoundland and Labrador tonight. After just over 4 years in power, Dwight is stepping down as Premier of the province.
Tonight, I'm announcing that my time in politics is coming to an end. It's time for me to spend more time with my family and friends in Deer Lake and to live a more private life.
Our Atlantic correspondent Ross Lord has been speaking to his sources and joins us now. Ross, the Premier was facing a leadership review. Was this a preemptive move on his part?
I think it's a fair question, Robin, because there have always been rumblings that members of Ball's caucus were unhappy with him. And we know from our sources that there are plenty of people who want his job, caucus members or other people with Liberal connections. And Ball has also been dogged by scandals over a big patronage appointment and by finances, the crushing provincial debt, and also the massive overrun for the Muskrat Falls Hydro Project construction. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians feared that to pay that overspending back, their electrical rates were going to go through the roof. And just last week, Ball and the federal government announced a plan to keep the lid on power rates. The timing of that announcement tonight as part of Ball's legacy makes more sense.
Ross, how does this play out with the federal Liberal government in Ottawa?
Well, it's interesting because Trudeau and Ball, their political careers have sort of paralleled each other in some ways. Ball won that big majority in 2015 in the afterglow of Trudeau's big victory, and the fortunes of both leaders took a hit last year when the federal and Newfoundland Liberals were both knocked down to minority status. When Ball came to power, he became one of 7 Liberal premiers. Today, only Newfoundland and Labrador and Nova Scotia are run by provincial Liberals. Ball does say he'll continue to represent his riding on the province's west coast until the next election, which in a minority could happen pretty much any time. And if power does change hands, that will present yet another potential challenge for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Ross Lord, thanks. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called an emergency meeting today to help put an end to anti-pipeline blockades that have shut down much of Canada's rail system. The government group discussed the dispute over a natural gas pipeline that crosses Wet'suwet'en territory in Houston, BC. 20 First Nations band councils that are elected agreed to the $6.6 billion, 670-kilometer Coastal GasLink pipeline. But some of the elders of the Wet'suwet'en Nation aren't on side, arguing they hold authority over the traditional lands. They'd been protesting in the area for months. Then the RCMP began enforcing an injunction to clear the way for construction. In solidarity, demonstrations have been flaring up all over the country, most notably in southern Ontario, in Mohawk territory near Belleville. So how did southern Ontario become a flashpoint? It's a busy rail corridor, and service has been stopped cold, stalling the nation's economy. As our chief political correspondent David Aiken reports, despite Trudeau's urgent meeting, it's still not clear how or when the blockades will come down.
Prime Minister, what can we expect today?
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrived at his Parliament Hill office for an urgent cabinet committee meeting. They had one task: find a way to bring down the barricades that have all but brought Canada's rail network to a halt. But minutes after starting the meeting on bringing blockades down, a new one went up at a U.S. border crossing in eastern Ontario. Protesters in southern Manitoba had the same idea, trying to shut down the main north-south link to America. In Toronto, a noisy protest against oil pipelines. Even though the pipeline at the center of this dispute is for natural gas. Meanwhile, this rail blockade near Belleville, Ontario, has been up for more than 10 days. It has forced Via Rail to cancel more than 400 trains, affecting more than 83,000 passengers. Rail blockades elsewhere in Ontario, in Manitoba, and in BC have disrupted Canada's freight system. Just off the coast of Vancouver, a fleet of ships waits to offload cargo that has nowhere to go. CN Rail handed out 450 layoff notices Sunday, and its union worries that number could rise to 6,000 by week's end. And a new worry in all of this, a potential hike in food prices because of higher freight costs.
We may not experience shortages, but there'll be more financial pressures put on distributors to actually keep costs down.
Hence that urgent cabinet meeting back on Parliament Hill, and yet, as he left Monday's meeting, the Prime Minister could not say when or how those economy-stalling blockades would be lifted.
I understand how worrisome this is for so many Canadians and difficult for many people and families across the country. We're going to continue to focus on resolving this situation quickly and peacefully, and that's what we're going to do.
And as the economic pressure mounts, the political temperature is about to rise as well. MPs return to Ottawa Tuesday after a week back in their ridings, and these blockades and the economic disruption they are causing are certain to dominate the agenda. Robin.
David Aiken in Ottawa. And one last note, Via Rail announced late today it has cancelled all operations until the end of the day Wednesday, with the exception of Sudbury White River and Churchill-the Pas. Not all resource projects with Indigenous communities in Canada are getting derailed. The Quebec government and the Cree Nation have agreed to a major long-term deal. Premier François Legault and the James Bay Cree have signed a $4.7 billion agreement that will extend rail lines north and protect new wildlife habitats over the next 30 years. Legault says the project, also known as the Grand Alliance, will help curb greenhouse gas emissions from diesel trucks. There's another big shakeup at Bombardier with a deal to sell its train division. The Montreal-based company will offload its rail business to French train giant Alstom. The agreement is worth more than $8 billion US. It will narrow Bombardier's focus to private jets and help pay down the company's debt load of more than $9 billion. For decades, Bombardier has received billions of dollars in subsidies from both federal and provincial levels of government. Some welcome news tonight for Canadians stuck on board a coronavirus-stricken cruise ship in Japan. The federal government says a plane is now en route to pick them up and bring them home. Meanwhile, there's a scramble to track down Canadians from another cruise ship after an American passenger tested positive for the virus. Here's Heather Yourex-West.
The streets of this normally bustling Cambodian town have become unusually quiet. Tourism had already taken a hit in recent months. Now another blow.
Okay, so this is a happy night.
Just days after the community welcomed the more than 1,400 passengers of the MS Westerdam, there is news that one of those passengers has tested positive for COVID-19.
Obviously, we're working very closely with the ship's manifest to try and understand who has been traveling from that particular ship and what their travel path is. 271 Canadians had been on board the ship. Some of those passengers have reportedly already made their way back home. We're working right now to try and understand which Canadians have left the ship and what their travel routes are, and we'll have more to say as we understand that circumstance.
Meanwhile, Canadians quarantined aboard another cruise ship, the Diamond Princess, are preparing to come home. Late Monday afternoon, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister confirmed via Twitter that a government-chartered flight was on its way to Tokyo and that Canadians aboard the ship who were not ill could expect to fly home Tuesday. More than 450 people aboard the ship have tested positive for the virus, including at least 15 Canadians. More than 300 American cruise ship passengers arrived back in the U.S. early Monday, where they will be kept isolated for 14 days at military bases in Texas and California. When they finally arrive home, Canadian evacuees will be isolated as well at the NAV Canada Training Institute in Cornwall, Ontario. An exhausting prospect for those who have already been quarantined for 13 days and counting.
I just hope to see an end to this. That's all, one way or another. I'm tired.
Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
In China, authorities are considering more precautions as COVID-19 spreads. With millions of people still in lockdown, officials are now reportedly weighing whether to delay one of the country's most important political gatherings of the year. A government spokesperson told Chinese state media that delaying the annual parliamentary meeting would give the communist government more time to get the situation under control. Since the outbreak began, Chinese officials say more than 1,800 people have died. And as of today, the total number of cases sits at more than 73,000. Chinese officials insist there are positive signs. They say the daily number of new cases appears to be going down. But the World Health Organization says it's too early to know if the worst is over.
This trend must be interpreted very cautiously. Trends can change as new populations are affected. It's too early to tell if this reported decline will continue. Every scenario is still on the table.
In Japan, there is so much concern over the spread of COVID-19, drastic steps are being taken to reduce crowds in public spaces. Organizers of the Tokyo Marathon, typically one of the biggest races in the world, say they're restricting the event to only elite runners. And public birthday celebrations for the Emperor of Japan have been canceled. The event in Tokyo typically draws tens of thousands of people. In Hong Kong, there's another sign of the growing panic over the outbreak. Police say armed robbers tried to steal hundreds of rolls of toilet paper outside a supermarket. Over the last few weeks, coronavirus concerns have fueled a run on toilet paper, and stores have struggled to keep their shelves stocked. In today's case, police say the stolen supply was recovered a short time after the theft, and 2 men were arrested. There's an about face tonight from the New Brunswick government on healthcare reforms it announced last week. The province will now keep overnight hospital emergency services. The cash-strapped government has discovered there's a high price to pay for trying to save healthcare dollars. Once again, here's Ross Lord.
For New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs, declaring a healthcare crisis is easy.
An aging demographic coupled with a growing labor force shortage is hampering our ability to provide the right care in the right place at the right time.
The hard part is finding solutions. Last week, the government announced unprecedented measures, a plan to close 6 hospital emergency departments during overnight hours, moving doctors and other staff to daytime shifts when there's more demand. Suddenly, the Premier is backing off.
I can't in good conscience move forward without addressing the concerns and fears that have been brought to light.
Higgs says the affected communities had more questions than health authorities could answer. Now, instead of using Family Day to protest the cuts, people are expressing relief.
We need our lab, we need our X-ray department, and most of all, we need our emergency room, and I'll do everything I can to make sure that happens.
Some see New Brunswick's about face as a lesson to other parts of Canada as they look to improve or at least maintain their health care.
I think what they can learn is that any time they're looking at serious change that's going to affect people, their lives, they have to realize all the factors, you know, the politics of it, the money of it, but also people's genuine fears and emotions, that they're worried about themselves, they're worried about their loved ones.
Since Thursday, New Brunswick's progressive Conservative government lost the support of 2 key MLAs, including Deputy Premier Robert Gauvin, who resigned from the party. With their minority government in danger of being toppled, Higgs now says he'll consult with communities over the spring and summer, suggesting any changes won't happen for a while. A new position for a would-be healthcare reformer who is now in retreat. Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
The race to the White House has a newcomer surging ahead. Coming up, how Mike Bloomberg is selling himself as the one to defeat Donald Trump. Plus, up, and away. The buzz over this historic flight. He was late to the race, but Mike Bloomberg has quickly become too big to ignore. The former New York City mayor is using his personal fortune to mount a campaign to unseat Donald Trump. But first, he'll have to win the Democratic nomination. As Jackson Proskow explains, the billionaire's deep pockets are making him a surprise contender.
He's the other wealthy New Yorker running for president.
How we doing?
And Mike Bloomberg intends to give Donald Trump a run for his money.
Mr. President, you can't bully me, and I won't let you bully the American people.
Bloomberg has put his $62 billion fortune where his mouth is.
I'll build an economy that delivers good jobs.
Flooding the airwaves with ads that he paid for.
Mike will get it done.
Shaking up the crowded race for the Democratic nomination.
He thinks he can buy this election. Well, I got news from Mr. Bloomberg, and that is the American people are sick and tired of billionaires buying elections.
To the chagrin of the other candidates, Bloomberg has already rocketed up to third place in the polls without ever joining a debate or appearing on a ballot.
I think he cannot hide behind the airwaves and the money.
What Bloomberg is really selling is his ability to get under Donald Trump's skin.
Look, he's a lightweight. He's a lightweight. You're going to find that out. He's also one of the worst debaters I've ever seen. And his presence is zero.
The ways you can tell is that if he's worried, if he mentions you, and he's a narcissist.
The billionaire is an unlikely choice for a Democratic Party that has moved to the left. He's a former Republican and is still under fire for his time as mayor of New York when he promoted a police policy known as stop and frisk that targeted people of color.
I apologized for the practice and the pain that it caused.
But Democrats may be willing to look past that if they think he can beat Trump. Bloomberg is betting it's that simple.
I can understand voters who are looking at Michael Bloomberg saying, okay, well, good, we won't have to worry about that with him. He's willing to spend what it takes to defeat this guy.
He'll appear on the ballot for the first time in 14 states on Super Tuesday, a test of whether his expensive outsider campaign has earned him the trust of Democrats. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Still ahead, the jet man who will have your imagination soaring.
You're watching Global National.
Boats have replaced cars on major roads in parts of England and Wales. Storm Dennis has prompted 5 severe flood alerts, and the government is warning there's a danger to life. A month's worth of rain fell over the weekend, damaging thousands of homes and businesses. At least 3 people have died. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he has no plans to visit the flooded areas. In Jackson, Mississippi, neighborhoods are underwater. The Pearl River crested at just over 11 meters this morning. That's the 3rd highest level ever recorded for this body of water. Several hundred homes have been damaged and a state of emergency remains. Search and rescue crews responded to 16 calls for help over the past couple of days. More rain is on its way tonight, and water levels aren't expected to recede for days. What we are about to show you might make you believe people can fly. Vince Braffet from France blasted off with a complex carbon wing developed by a team of international engineers. The technology, powered by 4 mini-jet engines, allowed Braffet to go as high as 1,800 meters and even perform a mid-air loop. The stunt was done as part of Dubai's Expo 2020. Up next, the push to add a Canadian hero to your wallet. Move over, Sir Wilfrid Laurier. The Bank of Canada wants to put a new face on the $5 bill. It's now taking nominations to name the next notable Canadian. The list includes prominent politician Tommy Douglas, hockey hero Tim Horton, and even beloved actor John Candy. But there is a big push for another revered Canadian. A city in BC is promoting its hometown hero Terry Fox. And as Mike Armstrong explains, the timing couldn't be better.
Do you want to touch his hand? Okay.
This is a pretty common conversation for parents across Canada, teaching your kids about Terry Fox and his attempt to run across Canada. Well, Brad West is also the mayor of Fox's hometown. He's pushing for Terry Fox to be put on the $5 bill and says he's not having any trouble getting people on board.
A lot of people are like, that's an absolute no-brainer. You know, people are pretty enthusiastic about it.
This coming April will mark 40 years since Terry Fox dipped his prosthetic leg in the Atlantic Ocean and hit the road. Since that day, more than $750 million has been collected for cancer research in his name. His marathon of hope grew as he went, and it hasn't stopped, even though cancer cut him down and he never made it to the Pacific.
All I can say is if there's any way I can get out there again and finish it, I will.
Now, the nominations are pouring into the Bank of Canada. They're listed on its website, 303 and counting. But Port Coquitlam, Fox's hometown, is campaigning to get their guy chosen.
Yeah, no, 100% agreed on that, yeah.
Already acted on it.
Terry is a unifying choice because he really embodies all the values that I think all of us, no matter where we live, hold dear to our heart.
Now, if there are Terry Fox runs in every part of the country, there are also supporters all over. Eddie Nolan saw Fox run in Montreal in 1980. He's run every year since. Nolan's also been leaning on his inspiration recently in his own battle with cancer. He says he'd love to see Canadians start calling the $5 bill the Fox.
Oh, man. I'm behind this so much, 1,000%.
Some fans online have even put up suggestions for what a Fox Fiver could look like. There may be other candidates, but none so far seems to have a campaign behind them. Public support is one of the criteria the Bank of Canada will be considering. If it comes down to popularity, that likely makes Terry Fox, well, the frontrunner. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is Whitehorse. We would love to see your corner of this country, so email your pictures to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.